all those in favor, opposed, so ordered. 7K, Grace Ross requests City Council to hold their expectation that the Worcester Police will enforce the law, both criminal statute and obligations under the Police Reform Act, as to the evictions as described in the attached document. Although I agree with the premise of this, I just like to get a detailed report, like whether the rights, like what does the police do? Because I know the chief gets a lot of calls the last minute, so we can understand this. Like, where's the disconnect? I want to at least get a detailed report. Councilor King.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do have a quick question on this because repeatedly comes before us, and I appreciate your motion. And I'm sure most of these things will be addressed when that motion is honored. Through the chair to the administration, if just for clarification, my understanding that part of this is about the police witnessing or observing a constable who's using police powers or some level of force. Through the chair to the administration, I just want a question as to, do we track, well, for number one, are the constables that work for the city or we approve? Can you explain that process very briefly and what oversight, if any, the city has of those individuals through the chair?
Mr. Manager.
Through the chair to the council, the constables that apply to the city, they go through the police department. It's an application that starts in the police department. They have to submit a number of references as part of that application. They have to also make sure that there's a bond associated with that application. It goes through a review through the law department, my office, and eventually then I sign off and present it to the council. And so that typically is kind of the process for the constable's application process.
And through the chair to the administration, it's repeatedly come before us that I'll use the words used here, they've been referenced as police powers being used. Have we had any reports from the Worcester Police Department regarding concerns? Do we know whether or not those folks or those constables are approved to actually act with those police powers in terms of use of force?
Through the chair to the council, the constables that we appoint here in the city, some of them are city employees through the Special Services Department, and others are general public. To my knowledge, right now, none of them have gone through the police academy in terms of the city constables. If there are constables from outside the community that the court is appointing to serve, that's something that we wouldn't have an understanding or background to know if they do have the arrest powers or they don't have the arrest powers. That's something that will lie within that community.
Thank you very much for the delineation. Just as it relates to the concerns that repeatedly are coming before us in this body, you indicated that the constables appointed or approved or whatever the terminology is by the city, that they do not have the ability, they have not been through the training through the police academy. Is that accurate? I just want to confirm and verify what that statement is so that folks can have an understanding and we can as well.
Yeah, I can have the chief respond to that to be more clear and confirm, but my understanding, we currently have about, I believe, 24 constables in the city that are city Worcester appointed, but I'll let the chief answer or give more information.
Through the chair of the council, that's correct. They are not certified, and this came about due to the 2020 Act, where you have to get post-certified through the state. Constables had a right of arrest prior to that. Now they must go through a police academy to actually have that right of arrest again. So they do not, but as far as a constable coming from outside the city, they go to housing court, the judge stipulates that they're going to be a special process server, and then they can execute civil process in the city once that comes through. So what our job is, we'll get a call from Grace saying there's an execution going down. We respond to the scene and we preserve the peace. If a crime takes place, then we would take the responsibility of making an arrest if it's an arrestable offense. Besides that, Worcester Police have no authority to execute civil process, just as Bill Gardner said on the screen. We cannot do civil stuff. That's for constables or for sheriff's deputies who are certified and can make arrests.
Thank you. And again, from my understanding, so if you could, I'm gonna ask you to reiterate, if this constable is approved by the courts, are they or are they not allowed to enact force when they're conducting their business, through the chair?
Only if they graduated from an MPTC police academy.
Thank you. And through the chair to the administration, in terms of the interests of our law enforcement here in the city, what protections do we have for them if, in fact, there's a use of force? And we indicated that some of those folks from the courts may or may not be able to exact that force. How do the officers on the scene know whether or not that person from the court is verified and certified to use force? Is there some type of paper trail? Is there some sort of notification? Just in order to ensure that there's no liability for law enforcement or for the city, through the chair.
Chief?
Through the chair to the council, what we do now is we meet ahead of time. Grace Ross is usually in the lobby. We speak with her. Our instructions, we actually went to housing court, sat down with the magistrates to make sure we had the correct game plan going forward so that the police were doing the correct thing. We sat down with them, they gave us our guidelines. Those guidelines were any problems that they have with any proceeding coming up, they were to go to the housing court and get the authority from them, whether or not it be a bankruptcy, whatever type of stay on the order. We do not know going in if you graduated from the police academy. We try to communicate with everyone prior to getting there, including the constables. We do not want to arrest anybody at these things. Sometimes our hands are tied. There will be people, protesters at the location, making a human chain, blocking the doors, and there are authority with a form from the court saying that this execution is to go through. So the police are put in a very difficult position.
Thank you. I certainly recognize that position that they're being placed in, particularly without knowing. Those guidelines that are referenced, have those been rendered to policy and engaged in any sort of negotiation with the union, or is that simply some level of guidelines that's being provided to the officers? Through the chair.
After we went through our court proceedings, we met with the city law department, and we put out a, basically not a policy, written policy, but procedurally, how they were to enforce this. We try to use the same lieutenant or official every time so that they have the most experience with it, because you really need to be an attorney when you get there and you have people handing you, caches of documents for the cop to go through on the scene.
Right. And
that's not good.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Chairman, my only recommendation here would be that an order, a motion that the manager take a look into any policy in other municipalities relative to this process. We don't want our law enforcement in litigation. We don't want the city in litigation if there's an issue that goes down and that person is actually not certified or unbeknownst to folks that are there. And I think for the homeowners, they should also know what they're stepping into. And I don't know if there's exactly an answer, but certainly I think the question should be posed if there's another way to do this. It repeatedly comes before us, and we want to protect our residents and we want to protect our employees as well. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
No, I agree that we should protect our residents, so we'll send that to the manager along with Council King's motion. Those in favor, opposed, so ordered.